Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Juggle is Real. I'm Andryanna, and this topic gets a lot of requests. A lot of parents are going to really feel in a very real way for this one because if you saw the title, if you have a child with ADHD, or maybe you're just suspecting it, you've probably had moments where you think, "Oh, like, why won't they just listen? Or why does everything have to feel so much harder than it should? Or why does something simple turn into a full back and forth or a meltdown or, yelling and all of the things?" And I think what's important about the conversation that I'm going to share is that we're not just talking about behavior, we're talking about what's underneath it, because so often what looks like defiance, what feels like resistance, what gets labeled as not listening is actually something else entirely. And when you don't understand that, everything is a lot more frustrating for you, for parents, for teachers, and especially for your child. And that's why I'm so grateful to be joined by Shannon Kalinka from Keep It Playful Parenting today. Shannon works with families navigating ADHD, and what I love about her approach is that she brings both a professional lens and a lived experience into the conversation. She's in it, she sees it every day, and she's helping parents shift from trying to control behavior to actually understanding it. So, like I mentioned, she's the creator of Keep It Playful Parenting. I follow her on Instagram. It is so helpful. It's a neurodivergent parenting brain built on the belief that connection changes everything. She has a background in early childhood education and child and youth care, and Shannon has spent years working alongside the families and the children with complex needs before she became a parent herself to two neurodivergent children. She was diagnosed with ADHD at age 44, and she brings both the professional training and that day to day lived experience to everything she creates. Her platform on Instagram has about 100,000 followers, and she translates those ADHD neuroscience research into practical, shame free tools for exhausted parents. And like I said, I follow along, and it has been so helpful. And we've talked on the show before with Dr. Kim Van Dusen, maybe a month or two ago, about parenting through play. Definitely check that episode out. But this conversation really builds on that in a practical way. So for this chat, we are getting into the real reason your child says just a minute and doesn't follow through, why direct requests often backfire, why transitions can feel so hard, and how to reduce the daily friction that so many families are exhausted by. What I think is most important is that this conversation moves away from that, try harder approach and closer towards what actually is going to help and support your kiddo and your family. So if that sounds good, let's dive right in.
This is the Juggle is Real podcast. I hope you feel seen, that you realize your worth, lighten your load, and prioritize your own needs. As we hear from leading experts and well-known faces in the wellness, entrepreneurship, education, and motherhood space, I hope you gain insights, proven practices, and learn actionable tools to help you enjoy the juggle of work, family, and everything in between with a little less stress and a lot more ease, joy, and fun. Most of all, I hope you find what you need to simplify, streamline, and supercharge your own journey of better balance and self-love. Are you with me? Let's get started.
Shannon, thank you so much for taking some time to join us on The Juggle is Real. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I've said it already, but this is a topic that a lot of people request and a topic that's personal to me and something that I'm always trying to learn more about in my own family life. So thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to talk about this because it is my favorite topic. So,
Yeah, and you really do live, breathe, sleep. It's all aspects of your life as well. And so before we do get into everything, I would love to start with you. Can you share more about yourself, your background, your experience, and what led you to the work that you're doing?
yes, absolutely. So, I've basically been working with children since I was 12. I just was always drawn to I just felt like I intrinsically sort of understood them. And I started babysitting very early on. And I was always that babysitter that parents contacted because I was really good with the quote unquote difficult kids, the kids that nobody else seemed to understand how to handle. And I just sort of identified with them. And at the time, I didn't understand why. And then eventually I went on and got my early childhood education certification, as well as infant toddler specialty, which informed all things child development, early childhood play. Um, and I transferred that into a child and youth care degree. So that gave me further learning on child development and the importance of play and theory and putting that into practice, counseling, relationships, and meeting children and families where they are at. And I worked in, childcare, out of school care. I worked in preschool. I worked with, families. And I just, over time, this was all before I was a mom, working with special needs kids as well. I just believed so much in, what I had learned and I saw it working in practice. And then when I became a mom, I had these two little girls that were just, let's say we were extra. We were they were just on another level. And as I ended up going through what was the diagnostic process with them, they were had received their diagnosis, and I was diagnosed with ADHD at the ripe old age 44. And it was at that time that I realized everything that I had been learning and practicing and applying in other realms was what was missing from the approach to parenting and teaching neurodivergent kids. And so, as you said, I lived, ate, breathed, experienced it, and it just really is an area that I feel I am right inside of. And so that makes it a lot easier for me to apply and teach, because I feel it, I be it, or I am it. And yeah, it's just makes sense for me.
Well, I'm so glad that you are doing what you're doing. And so thank you for that, because is so much around the topic of ADHD. I think there's so many misconceptions, and there's so many things that I think we don't quite understand. And so
Yeah.
from your perspective, you said like that you were working in this field and then you became a mom. You have two kiddos with ADHD. You have ADHD, and you realize, that we really have to be taking a second look at this and doing more. So what do you think is maybe wrong or like misunderstood about how people, parents, families, teachers are typically approaching ADHD kids that's not quite working?
I would say, from what I've seen, the biggest misunderstanding is parents and teachers alike. They see what ADHD children, they see the external behaviors and the symptoms, and they see those as intentional or willful or manipulative. And that is just not the case at all. Um, it's not calculated, it's just a very real, like, body response, brain response to their existence in the world. They're just doing the best they can in the moment. And so um, that misunderstanding kind of has informed the way that ADHD children have been understood and treated for, up until now, basically. And until that changes, I don't think that we're going to see the type of growth and thriving with these ADHD kids that they deserve. So, um, like when a child explodes at you or in the classroom, they're not doing it because they're choosing to be controversial or difficult. It's really like a fight or flight situation, and so the judgment that comes with that, I think, deserves a second look.
I agree. I agree. And um I think there's many are misunderstood in these instances. So I do want to talk about, how we can look at these misconceptions and maybe some of these friction points and how we can better support our kiddos. But I also want to talk about the notion of, like the behavior, because what you're saying is like a lot of kids with ADHD get labeled as like they're a bad kid, or they don't listen, or they just need to try harder. Um and you do say you have two girls. I have three boys. One of my children has ADHD, and they do. From what I've read, girls and boys do show their ADHD symptoms differently. So before we go into some of these behavioral things and how we can support our kids, can you share maybe how you have seen ADHD in girls versus boys?
Yes. I would say that is one of the major differences is the seeing of it, physically seeing evidence. A lot of times with ADHD boys, you see more of the hyperactive presentation where they're physically active. They move their body a lot. They jump around. Maybe they're, more flamboyant or exuberant in situations, and that impulsivity is really externalized. With ADHD girls, because of all the societal pressures that are already on girls and women, we're sort of ingrained with a different idea of how we're supposed to present and be in the world. And for ADHD girls, that hyperactivity is most often internalized. And so that looks like, a daydreamer with a lot of, thoughts that never stop, people pleasing, perfectionism. So you might have an extremely high achieving student that gets excellent grades, but is very anxious, always wants everything to be perfect. Um, it's a very internalized experience, and the masking level is so high that ADHD girls and women typically don't get diagnosed until their 30s or later, because nobody can see that we're struggling. They say, well, everything looks fine, there's no problems. And all of the problems are happening internally: mental health, the self loathing, the striving for perfection. All of that is not something that you can quantify by observing a child in a classroom unless you know what you're looking at. So the internal versus external symptoms are very different in girls versus boys.
And that does make a lot of sense. And so I think, you've named a lot of these misconceptions. Well, they're not loud, or they're not hyper, they're not, running around, or they get good grades. They're very intelligent, they're very smart. They can't have ADHD. It can't be ADHD. Any other misconceptions? Because I think a lot of these can be, feel common, but also if you're not thinking in that way, then it can be easy to sort of miss. Anything else there that maybe are misconceptions, or maybe people don't realize would be someone who might be neurodivergent?
I would say socially is often, you can notice social differences. We're interrupters. We have thoughts, and if we don't say them right away, it's almost physically painful. And usually they'll disappear. We'll lose track of what we wanted to say. So we may burst into a conversation. Um, Perhaps we have a lot of conflict with the people around us, not intentionally always. We might be more blunt. We might say the wrong thing at the wrong time, because that impulsivity that comes with ADHD includes verbal impulsivity, um, which is a tough one. So you might see a lot more friction in friend groups. I would say, what's another major one? Just like quiet fidgeting. Not all stims are obvious, and every ADHDer has stims, whether they realize it a lot. A lot of times girls have less visual stims. So like I sit and I'm constantly running my fingernails under my other, like I'm doing something with my fingers at all times. And I didn't realize that was a stim. Maybe we twirl our hair, maybe we, fidget like every 2 seconds, like me. So you'll see
And
a
can you
lot
just
more.
explain what a stim is for someone who
Oh,
might not know
yes.
that?
Yeah. So usually with ADHD, you have all this energy that sort of needs somewhere to go. And as a regulatory measure, it comes very naturally to need some sort of a movement. So you might see, like jumping up and down, or you'll see verbal stims. Like if you have a child that is always making weird noises or singing all the time, the same phrase over and over, that's a vocal stim. Um, you've got like just your regular like physical stims. You might jiggle your leg, jiggle your knee, twirl your hair. Um, Sometimes you'll see people doing like biting the inside of their cheek a lot, biting their nails. It's a basically just a behavior that you do subconsciously. It's very hard to stop, and it helps you feel like your energy has a place to go while you're being like sitting or listening or doing something that you is not maybe the most stimulating for you. Like I'm sitting here and I have a fidget the whole time, and it helps me concentrate on what you're saying and what I want to say. Because if not, I'd be, fiddling with the seams in my pants or something. It's like a regulatory outlet is the best description, I think. But it's different for everyone.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. And again, another misconception be like, quit playing with your jacket, or
Yes.
my son can sometimes bite on the collar of his sweater or shirt,
Yes.
or yeah, like quit fidgeting around. And in
Yeah.
a classroom that can be disruptive, but there are tools that we can use. Like you're saying, you have the specific fidgets that can be helpful. And I notice you're
Yes.
holding a Nido. That's like the prize of my family right now. If
Yes.
you can get one, they're the most like crazy. Those are great things to have. But
Yes.
I think the more that we can just understand that these are um, normal ways for those who are neurodivergent to regulate and
Yes.
to just be in a world that wasn't built for them. And
Yes.
so I want to shift into um, as parents and what we're experiencing and how we can better support and understand our children. Because for a parent listening who feels like I want to understand as much, but I'm constantly repeating myself, or it feels like I'm just being ignored, or
Yeah.
like there's meltdowns every morning or before school or at nighttime. um how can we like look at these, I would call them pain points in a family, things that
Yes.
are challenging to run and to be as part of a family unit. How can we better understand them, and how can we move through them with less friction?
You know, a lot, I hate to say this because the parents aren't going to want to hear this, but a lot of the ways that you can fix that frustration is through regulating yourself as a parent going into the situation. Um, they feed off of our energy, and easier said than done. But if we can't be calm while they are having a storm, it's very hard for them to come back to neutral if we're coming at them with anger or accusations or a punitive, lens. Then they will respond to that energy and we will also be more heightened. And so, unfortunately, parent education and parent regulation are the two best ways to help solve those problems. Um, as an ADHD parent myself, I am triggered by all the same things that my kids are triggered
Mhm.
by, and their issues dysregulate me as well. And so I have had to employ so many different tactics to try and work through my natural tendency in that way. But it is really, really hard. I think parents, the biggest disconnect is that they expect parenting to look like it does for everyone else. But with ADHD kids, it's not going to look the same. They're not going to always respond the same way when you ask them to do something. They're not always going to be able to do it. You might not enjoy the same activities because there's just a different level of issues. So I think reconciling the idea that parenting is supposed to look a certain way is what parents often are pushing against. Like, it's not supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to give you a command, you're supposed to do it, or else you're in trouble because I'm the boss. That's just not quite how it's going to look in ADHD. And that doesn't mean that you are doing it wrong, or, you're not a stern enough parent. It just means you need to take a different approach, one with a little more curiosity, um, and understanding, I guess, always giving the benefit of the doubt. And so in those moments, instead of asking yourself, what consequence fits this? What do I need to teach my child right now in this moment so that they quit doing this? You should ask yourself, what does my child need right now? why is this happening? Is the need that my child is, expressing? And that is a really key reframe.
I love that. What does my child need right now? And many cases too, they just need you to be regulated so that they can help regulate themselves. That's so,
Yeah.
so important. So let's go through some of these maybe pain points or friction points so you can explain it to us and how we might be able to be more curious and support our kids with what they actually need in these moments. So, a big one that happens in a lot of houses is, when you ask your child to stop doing something, and then they'll be like, okay, just a minute. And then
Yeah.
you're like, buddy, like, come on. And then, okay, yeah, yeah. And then it just doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
then, of course, and then inevitably, you're like, I told you 6 times to do that, and blah, blah, blah. So, let's go through this one. Let's go through the delayed responses. What is actually happening here?
Okay. So there are a few different things that are at work. When you are initially, hey, buddy, I need you to, put on your shoes. Sometimes the verbal processing, like auditory processing of what you've said, can be delayed, especially if your child is involved or hyper focused in something else. If he's busy playing with his favorite toy, and he's been at it for like 40 minutes and he's really into it, and then you just say, hey, time for shoes. It might take his brain a long time to even register that I've heard words. What do those words mean? What's expected of me? Oh, I need to respond. I need to, that's a lot of steps for an ADHD brain in hyperfocus. So there's probably going to be an auditory processing delay. Um, Also, for ADHD brains, we sort of see time in a different way. We have a now and a not now, and that is really all there is. And so there's a huge gap between stopping something and starting something else. So transitions can be really, really hard. Um, because that ties into your executive dysfunction, which is one of the main symptoms of ADHD. So it's not just as simple as dropping what you're doing, getting up and going to put your shoes on. There's a lot of other steps involved: motivating your body to want to do it, being okay, walking away from what you were focused on. Switching those gears is really, really hard. So it's kind of like when you're in hyperfocus, you're in a dopamine state. Like ADHD brains, they don't they have if difficulty regulating and releasing dopamine and norepinephrine. And so when your ADHD child is involved in something that they are enjoying, that's a preferred activity, because we have interest-based nervous system, it's really hard to just leave that source of, those chemicals that we really, really need, and move on to a non-preferred task. So that there's just so many factors. If that answers your question.
So many factors. So,
Yeah.
is there a more effective way for parents to handle something like that? Like the direct request is going to often backfire. They're not going to process it, or it's going to feel physically painful or challenging for your kiddo to pull
Yeah.
themselves out of that. So, are there any sort of tips or tricks or tactics that we can use to sort of cut through that hyper focus? Because there are going to be instances, we have to get to school, or we have to come eat dinner, or we have to, brush our teeth, these sorts of things. What would work better than just like the direct command or yelling, come on for dinner, 20
Yeah.
times?
Yes. I think ideally, if you can give a few warnings beforehand, like if you know that dinner's in 15 minutes and your child is busy with something, put a visual timer in their eye line so that they can see, okay, 15 minutes looks like, this much time left. That's helpful. 5 more minutes, 2 more minutes. It's almost time to stop. That's helpful. I think also, like, going over to where your child is. So if you're calling over to them from the kitchen, they're probably not going to register that you've spoken. A lot of times you have to physically go where your child is, get down on their level. Sometimes you can place a hand like on their shoulder or their arm and just wait for them to notice you, because sometimes they may not even register that you're in their space. Sometimes with my daughter, I can touch her and literally I can count to 60 and she still hasn't quite, she'll just be like, oh, hi, mommy. She just notices me all of a sudden. And so knowing that that kind of a lag exists very naturally is helpful when you're feeling really, really triggered as a parent that they're not acknowledging you. But touching them, getting on their level, and using less words. So, time for shoes instead of, buddy, we really got to get our shoes on. You got to put this way, blah, blah. That's too
Mhm.
many words, too much to process. Just communicate your specific message in as few words as possible. That makes it a little easier for them to process. I think also giving choices, choices that you can control. So, would you like to tidy this up now or in 2 minutes? You know, or um, like an indirect suggestion, like, I wonder if you should wash your hands before dinner. Sometimes that helps with the demand avoidance that might also come into play with ADHD kids. When we give them a direct request, their brain automatically is like, well, wait a minute. I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound interesting. Wasn't my idea. So you have to find creative ways to um, make indirect requests, just with your phrasing. So those are some of the main things that you can do every day, and it does take practice. You have to get into the rhythm of doing those steps, and your child will start to recognize that rhythm as well. Like, I still catch myself, shouting out from wherever I am, hey, everybody, it's almost time for school, knowing full well I'm going to have to repeat myself over and over, and again, then feel frustrated. Um, so it's about both parties kind of getting used to those routines.
This is all so helpful, so good. Just those transitions can be a real struggle in the household, especially with kids. And it's something that has been a challenge since my little guy was like super little, and we'd have to like leave a
Yeah.
play date. And so learning some of these little things, um, just in the moment can make things a little bit easier. It doesn't necessarily take away everything altogether, but like it's just like a small little shift, phrasing something as
Yeah.
a question versus like a direct command, like you're the drill sergeant, can make a world of difference. And really at the end of the day, like, what does it matter if they wash their hands before dinner? They're washing their
Yeah.
hands before dinner, whether you phrase it as a question or make a joke about it, or you're like the drill sergeant yelling at them to do this, that, and the other thing. I think for all children, but especially for those whose brains work a little bit differently. Can we talk about some of the big emotions and the regulations?
Yes. Yes.
Because there are a lot of big emotional reactions in ADHD kids. Can you talk to us about what the difference is between, the big meltdown or behavioral issues, what's really happening? And you kind of touched upon it earlier, but how can we help our children to regulate in those moments once we are regulated ourselves?
Yes, and I hear you because watching your child, have a meltdown can be so dysregulating for a parent. But I think it's really important to know that, like, a meltdown is not a behavioral issue. It's a nervous system event. So the outside looks terrible because the inside feels terrible, and it's not manipulatory. It's not like, there's a difference between a meltdown and like a tantrum, right? And usually with a tantrum, you can solve it almost immediately by just giving them what they want and then they're fine. But if that's not how it works with a meltdown, so the difference is you cannot talk a meltdown down in the moment. The meltdown has to happen. It has to play itself out. If you're trying to convince them to calm down or feel differently, you're not going to be successful. They cannot take on what you're saying, and you really can't reach them in that moment. All you can do really is provide presence without pressure. So being calm, which is so hard, and just being understanding, being there, letting them know, like, wow, this, I can tell this is so hard for you. We can wait here until you feel better, or just listening to whatever ridiculous, everybody hates me. It's, whatever it is that they're saying that's so extreme. We have the urge to want to fix it. We want to convince them otherwise. And that's really not the time. You just have to sort of hear what they're saying. Wow, you feel like everyone hates you? That's awful. No wonder you don't feel well. Um, you know, Also, some kids, like one of my daughters, I have to say almost nothing. If I talk, it makes everything worse. So silence or using only a couple words or empathetic sounds might be what they need. Sometimes they need physical distance. Sometimes they need physical proximity. Um, I think each parent knows their child. You've watched them have, upsets since they were babies, and you sort of get to know what they need and want from you in those moments. And if you're trying to communicate logic to them and it's really not landing, it's best to just focus on allowing time for calm and then coming back later in a different moment outside of that event. If you need to teach a lesson, that's the time. Um, but really, they just need to know, the main thing they need to know is, am I safe when I don't feel like a safe person? Am I safe here with you when I'm having these big feelings? And if they know for sure that you are a safe space to land, it's so much easier for them to move through those dysregulated moments um, with ease.
And sometimes the trickiest part is being the safe person because they know that they can
Yes.
have the meltdown with you. So that is another thing that I've learned, especially, a lot of children experience this, not just those with ADHD, but the after school restraint collapse. They've
Yes.
been holding it in all day. They've been trying to be good all day. And so said this, or maybe they got a bad mark, or maybe they embarrassed themselves. And then all of a sudden, once they're with you, maybe you say something, or maybe offhand, it's not even related to something that's happened at home, and then it's a big meltdown. So
Yes.
it's so tricky, but coming back to being that safe space, being what they need in that moment, and allowing them to be able to work through those emotions, like, it really is so helpful, as tricky as it is.
Yes.
um I want to talk about play, but before I do that, you did touch upon, something that could maybe cause a meltdown to happen, and everyone hates me, or these things that maybe aren't necessarily true, but things that
Yeah.
those with ADHD feel much differently and on a much greater scale. Um, because neurodivergent kids have had a lot more correction, a lot more criticism, and they're constantly being told, no, don't do this, no, do not do this, do that. There is a term for it. It's called RSD.
Yes.
So can you explain what RSD is, and kind of, if your kid might be experiencing that, because I know it's very, very common with
It
ADHD.
sure is. Yes, it is. Yeah, actually, RSD is sort of known to be experienced by 98 to 99% of ADHD people, but a lot of them don't know what it is that they're experiencing. It's basically, the best way I could describe it, like from personal experience, is it's a whole body feeling. It feels like, almost like actual prickles of shame and self loathing. And every bad thought that you've ever had about yourself just compounds in that moment, when you, whether it's real or perceived rejection, real or perceived judgment or correction, it just feels like you're so exposed. All of your weaknesses are exposed, and you're just filled with shame. And that may manifest as external anger, or an outburst, or a running away and avoidance type of a behavior, because you just will do anything in the moment to avoid those horrible, horrible feelings of rejection. So that's why it's called rejection sensitive dysphoria, because it really is disproportionate to what your neurotypical experience would be. And now that can be triggered, as I say, by something real that's actually happening, or just a perceived event. And very oftentimes, parents kind of need to be detectives in the moment. So if your child is melting down and you're like, wow, I really didn't think this very small thing would create a reaction like that, chances are that was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back in a string of events from throughout their day or their week or their month. Maybe that was just one thing in a long line of things. And so it's not always as obvious of a solution as you think, but it's very, very intense and very real. Um, yeah, it's tough. I almost, for me, it almost feels like someone dumps a bucket of cold ice water over my head. Like, in that moment,
Mm.
it feels like like the full body feeling. It's really, really hard.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking to think that our, people that we know and love are experiencing this. And I'm again just being able to be there for them and be safe for them. And I will say another, thing as well that I really do try to do more with my neurodivergent kiddo than my other kiddos. Not that I'm not complimenting them, but really leaning into the positive language, even with like small things, even,
Yes.
when they do brush their teeth, like, like, great job brushing your teeth. Your teeth look so sparkly clean. That's amazing. You're going to have great breath today. Or just like really trying to lean into the positive association and letting them know that they are getting some things right. Because like you said, that feeling of shame because they're constantly trying to, shift their brain to try to fit into a mold that is different. So I really do try to lean into that. Any tips or anything there, any common phrases or things that we can try to recall in the moment as parents to support RSD or just to support that constant correction all the time?
Yeah. Well, as you said, like specific positive praise makes such a difference. You mentioned, the accumulation of negative feedback that ADHD kids receive. I think it's like up to 20,000 more negative messages by the age of, was it 10 or 12?
Wow.
But yeah, it's a lot because ADHD kids are basically out here just living in the world, the body and the brain that they landed in, and everything that we're telling them is, no, you're doing it all wrong. You need to change everything and be different. And imagine that, right? Imagine, this is how I feel and this is what I do, but this is bad. I'm not supposed to be this way. I'm not supposed to do this. I have to be different, but I can't make myself be different because it's not a choice. Um, and so I think just feeling understood and truly seen on a regular basis outside of those moments really, really helps. Um, I have become the queen of pep talks with my kids. I sort of, when you know the pain points that your specific child has, you can speak to those a little more frequently. So, if your child is saying self deprecating things like, I'm so stupid, I always mess this up. Why am I, you hear those types of things, you can say outside of that moment, wow, you remembered to bring that for me? I even forgot my water bottle today. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. You're really good at noticing things. So outside of that moment, they're having positive feedback that, hey, I can do that thing that I think I'm so bad at. Or, um, you can relate that to any situation, with your child. And then in the moment, again, don't try and convince them to feel differently. Just maybe, if the talking's not working, be a loving body, offer, would you like a hug? Can I sit here with you? Get them a Kleenex if they're crying and just listen, look concerned and not a lot, oh, makes empathetic faces, I think is a helpful tool. There's not one phrase, but just, I love you. I see you. You're so good inside, this is not only just for you to figure out, I'm here, we can do this together, right? Just knowing that they're a team with you, I think releases a lot of the pressure to be perfect.
Oh,
So,
this is also good. This is also good. Shannon, one of the big areas that you really focus on in your work and in helping families is using play as a tool to increase connection and cooperation with kids. And, it doesn't have to be just something extra. So we had an episode a little while back with Dr. Kim Van Drunen about parenting through play, and it was such a helpful topic. Can you share, especially why this is helpful with kids who have ADHD and how it supports regulation and that cooperation?
yeah. So, being a playful parent, it's not just about like setting up elaborate play opportunities. It's about it's about bringing a playful energy and curiosity to the everyday moments. It's a really good way to diffuse a situation. If you've ever had the opportunity to sit and watch like a preschool teacher wrangle kids in circle time, and you see the way that they have this playful banter back and forth with kids, to get them to feel interested in things that they might not otherwise, look over here. This is so cool. You sort of have to bring that into every day with your ADHD kids. As I said before, ADHD brains are very interest based. So if it's not something that they care about or like, they're not going to want to do it or learn about it or, participate. And so finding a way to honor their need for innovation and creativity is what playful parenting for neurodivergent kids is all about. So like play is one of the most it's the primary nervous system regulatory like um, technique. It's just so calming, soothing. It's releases all kinds of positive feelings and increases connection, which is what we always want from parent to child. It's just so much better than, you know, a frowny face and an angry voice, really.
Absolutely. And, you kind of already said it too. Like, it doesn't have to be elaborate, slime everywhere in the house. But for a parent who feels like I just don't have time to sit down and play, like, or, there's not enough time in the day. I've got to get the dishes done. Or like, what would you say to that? And, what's an easy way that we can incorporate more of this?
Well, you can turn any everyday boring activity into something fun just in the way that you approach it. So, if your child is supposed to help you with the dishes, and they really don't want to do that, you could try narrating it with like an annoying sportscaster voice, just, like have a strange British accent and it looks like he's not gonna, whatever. You just act like a crazy exciting, fun person and do something unexpected in the moment that makes your child be like, whoa, weird, but it changes the energy. It's okay to be embarrassing. It's okay to be, out in left field. I give you full permission to be as playful and crazy as you want. Um, but just the way that you phrase it, the way that you could turn it into a game. Let's see who can, dry all their dish. Let's split it down the pile down the middle and I'll see if I can dry mine before you finish drying yours. Set a timer, go. If you gamify things, it makes everything more interesting. They love a good challenge. So make it challenging, make it silly. Just use every imagination tool that you can access in the moment, I guess, which does require you as a parent to be regulated. But I think the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Like it's not a switch that every parent can just flick on.
Hmm.
I have an easier time of it because as a former educator, I'm so used to being in that sort of nurturing, playful mode. And I understand that not everybody feels that way. A lot of the time, that is feedback that I get from some parents who just don't feel playful. But like, what makes your child laugh? Do they like fart jokes? Like, what does it for them? And then do that. Work it in, find a way.
Yeah, well, how's the three boys? The fart jokes are gonna land every time over here. But to your point, like it doesn't have to be like a big thing. It can just be being a little bit creative in the moment and turning what you would normally be doing into something that's a bit more playful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm constantly trying to think of things, and I've literally been in the bathroom in the morning before school when my son's not getting out of bed, being like, to chat GPT, like, okay, my son won't get out of bed. We have to leave for school. How can I turn this into something fun? What can I do to make it him want to do that? Like, and literally asking for ideas because in the moment I'm feeling the pressure. And I know that like me yelling at him is going to give me the opposite like effect. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be just you all the time. Like, get help where you can, but
Yeah.
it does make a difference.
It does. I mean, it doesn't even have to be anything other than just like finding a way to work in something that they like. So my daughter has a really hard time getting dressed and brushing teeth in the morning. And she can say to me, she even like sort of explains it to me as like, I know I have to do it, but I just like I can't really make my body want to do it. And so, the other day I was like, well, we got to get you dressed. Like time's really running out. Why don't we play your favorite music? So I got out my phone, put on Spotify, and just playing her favorite songs got her
Mhm.
jazzed up enough, gave her the energy, changed the mood that she could, listen to those while she brushed her teeth, while she got dressed. So it doesn't always have to be you as a hero with a great fun idea. It can just be, what do you like and how can I incorporate this here? Because play is one of those activities that is so regulatory, feeling safe and, in that sort of mode is a dopamine, kick, basically. Like, it helps your body feel so much better and calmer. And play also teaches skills. It teaches self-regulation. It teaches, helps you work on all kinds of things, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, like planning, conception of ideas, execution of things. There's so many opportunities in play that are enriching to your child's life and environment besides just getting them to do the thing. So over time, the quality of your different activities is going to be different, but in the moment, just find a way to provide one element in that, moment that they like, that they'll be interested in, that they will enjoy, even if it's as simple as playing their favorite music.
I love your approach. And that is so easy. Like, who doesn't love to
It
listen to a
is.
song? Like, pop on a
Yeah.
tune and get grooving, embarrass them a little, or, do some
Yes.
silly moves, and, like, everyone's laughing. And even if they're not, they're enjoying the song. So I really do love that. We are going to close out soon, but one thing that I do want to just end on before we do our rapid fire, because I want some quick responses from you, Shannon. But, just the notion that we're not always going to get it right. We are going to have bad days. Like, my hormones are all over the place, or if
Oh,
I'm really
yes.
tired, if it's like past 8:39, like the battles, I just don't have patience. And so there are going to be days, there are going to be times where maybe we are not thinking of something playful in the moment, or maybe we are not regulated and we yell, or we do something that we're not proud of in the moment, that we realize, crap, it wasn't his fault, or I shouldn't have reacted that way. And we, can feel a lot of stress and pressure, and we can feel a lot of guilt and shame when that
Mhm.
happens. So before we get into our rapid fire, can you just talk to us about just the piece of repair, and how important it is that regardless of, maybe what might have happened during the day, how we can reconnect through that repair?
Yes, absolutely. I think repair is probably your strongest tool as a neurodivergent parent. A lot of times we may it's misunderstand what their needs are, or we may, think that it's a time for correction when it's a time for understanding. And it's contrary to popular belief, admitting to your child that you may have approached it the wrong way is a strength and not a parenting weakness. And so, like, I mean, I'm human. I get dysregulated. I say things and act in a way that I regret. And I think the most powerful thing you can do for your child is to go up to them and be like, mommy really had a hard time, in the moment. And I said something to you that I know made you sad. And it's my responsibility to control my own feelings. And, I'm so sorry that we had that moment. Can we try again? You're important to me. All of the things you'd want a partner to say to you, right? Like, think about in a partner relationship, what do grown-ups say to other grown-ups? Those are the types of things that your kids want to hear as well. And I think just knowing that your children, the more one-on-one time that they spend with you in that connected sort of space, like daily one-on-one time, or even a few times a week, if that's all you can manage. But if you spend even just 10 minutes of focused time entering your child's world wherever they are, you repair, and then you hang out with them for a few minutes, you hear what they have to say, or you like, even if it doesn't make any sense to you, you just enter their world and be with them doing what they're doing. And usually, if you do that for even 10 minutes, you're going to get more cooperation out of them in the following hour than you would if you hadn't done that. And so it's really a preventative measure. That quality time, and that emotional connection is so important in your overall ADHD parenting journey.
Yeah, then we're not going to get it perfect all the time,
No,
but if we can recognize and, own up when we make a mistake. I mean, no one's perfect. We're all doing
nope,
this for the first time. And so, yeah, I think that part can, feel really hard. But as kids,
yeah,
I don't know how often, for a lot of our generation when we were raised, I don't know how often parents would come and say, I'm really sorry that I yelled at you, or something like that. So it
yeah.
might not be, common or ingrained, or something that we would think to do, but that little piece, can make a world of difference moving forward.
For sure. Yeah, I think I'll just finish up by saying A lot of times when I'm trying to make the right choice in the moment, I think about you have the one thought of, well, this is what I think parents are supposed to say. This is what my parents would have said. So you think that's what you should say. But what, as a child, did you wish that they would say? How did you wish they would meet you where you're at? And that is the way that you should move forward with your child. Like, what did you need in those moments as a child? And then can you provide that for your own kids?
Such a good reframe. Such a good reframe. Okay, are we ready to do some rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Okay, so whatever comes to mind, these are just some common things that I think parents could really put in their tool belt or to help understand things a little bit better. So, one thing that parents say that actually makes things worse.
Calm down. What's the big deal? You're just choosing to do this.
Yeah.
Always makes it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, then what's one small shift that could make a huge difference?
um, what about saying, "Wow, I never thought of it that way," when they have an idea or are blank. "No, I wanna do this." "Oh, okay. Well, I never thought of that. What a great idea." Making sure that they feel that their way of doing things is pretty cool too, because very often they're told to stop doing what they're doing, the way that
Yeah,
they're doing it. Yeah.
validate. I love that. Okay, one misconception about ADHD that really needs to go.
That behavior is purposeful, and it is not. As we said, it's a nervous system falling apart, and it's completely out of their control a lot of the time.
What's one tool that you use all the time?
Fidgets. I always use fidgets. Handheld fidgets are the easiest way to help keep someone regulated. You just have to find the right one.
Do you have any favorites?
Yeah, Neato is my
Neato?
Neato cube. I like the cube. I have it right now. I like the cube because it has the right amount of resistance, but and it's quiet, so it doesn't bother anyone. But everyone is completely different. Like we have bags and baskets of fidgets all over my house because everyone has a different preference.
Perfect. We'll have to keep trying. What is one thing that a parent can try today that will help their child immediately?
One-on-one connection time, purposeful. If all you can do is 10 to 15 minutes, like I said, it doesn't have to be a structured activity, but if you like put down your screens, they don't have screens, you're in an area by yourselves, and you just do what they want to do. Watch what they're doing, be with them, let them talk to you about stuff that's like second grade weird, kid stuff, and you just smile and nod and give them your full attention with no interruptions. And if you do that regularly, it just makes a huge difference to everything.
Okay, beautiful. Last question. One thing that you wish more people, especially parents, understood.
ADHD kids are they're yearning to feel belonging and to feel accepted for exactly who they are, and they're so misunderstood. And the more you can highlight the wonderful parts of them as you see it, the better off they're going to be.
Well, ending on tears for me. But it's so, so true. I'm so glad that we could connect, Shannon. I'm so grateful for the work that you do. For those of us who want to keep in touch, learn more about you, um, get all of the incredible advice that you share, especially on Instagram. I love your posts. Where can we find you and how can we learn more about you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Keep It Playful Parenting. I also finally got my Substack up and running, so I'm on there as well under the same name. And my resources that are downloadable are accessible through my Instagram link in bio as well. If you're looking for tools for your family at home, you can find them there. Yeah, that's my main spot.
And it's so helpful. It's things you wouldn't even realize. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, I have those so many things, so many like posts saved. And it's great to be
Oh,
able to
good.
come back to in the moment. So I'll definitely put the links in the show notes so that the listener can check it out. But I'm so grateful that we could chat. Thank you so, so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Oh, I am so happy that we had this chat. My sincere thanks to Shannon. This was such a helpful conversation for so many of us, myself included. What we're feeling day to day can be a lot of frustration. And it's not because we don't care. It's not because, we're necessarily doing anything wrong. It's because we just don't fully understand what's happening in the moment. And it can seem so hard. But when we start to see behavior differently, when we can understand what's underneath it, it can really change how we respond. And so, what I take away from this is that support doesn't mean doing more. It just means maybe doing things a little differently, shifting the approach, less control, more understanding, more connection, and more tools that actually meet your child where they are in the moment. So, thank you, Shannon, for bringing that perspective into this conversation. If this episode resonated, if you know someone who's struggling, share it with someone who needs it, because I know there are so many parents quietly navigating this and thinking that they are doing something wrong when they're not. So, as always, I'm linking Shannon's Instagram, how you can contact her, how you can reach out. It's all in the notes for this episode. Definitely reach out, follow along. And if you haven't yet, make sure you're subscribed. We've got some great episodes, great conversations coming up on The Juggle is Real. Rate, review, share, do all the things. And until the next episode, I cannot wait to see you back. Take good care.